My name is Maureen, and I let my sister stay in my apartment for a short time. When her boyfriend moved in, he changed the locks and made house rules for me. I came home one day, and my name was no longer on anything, including the door, bills, and even the truth. They trashed my furniture, sold my belongings, and told everyone I was the problem. It's amazing how far family will go when they assume you won't fight back. I thought letting my sister stay in my old apartment would be a kind gesture, something simple, temporary, and helpful during a tough season in her life. But what began as a quiet favor quickly unraveled into something I never expected. Boundaries blurred, respect vanished, and suddenly, I was the outsider in a space I once called home. Looking back now, I wonder, was kindness ever enough to protect what truly mattered? I always believed that kindness, especially toward family, was something you should never second guess. So when my mother called one quiet Sunday afternoon and asked if my younger sister could stay in my old apartment for just a little while, I didn't hesitate as long as I should have. At the time, I thought I was doing the decent thing. That's what family does, right? We make room. We give second chances. The apartment wasn't much, just a modest one-bedroom I'd held on to after my divorce. But to me, it was more than bricks and mortar. It had been my shelter when my life felt like it was falling apart. I remember sitting on the floor of that little living room after Mark left, surrounded by cardboard boxes and court papers, wondering how I'd start over. That space became my landing pad. I painted the walls myself, chose every bit of furniture with care, and even installed a lavender-scented diffuser that made the place smell like calm after chaos. It was mine, in the quietest, most necessary sense. When Mom called, I had just poured myself a cup of Earl Grey and was about to settle in for a rerun of an old cooking show. I didn't answer her call at first. It wasn't out of disrespect. I just knew, from experience, that her "How are you, sweetheart?" came with an agenda. And sure enough, when I did pick up, she skipped right past the small talk and into the favor. "Your sister's had a bit of a rough time," she said, her voice sugar-coated and far too practiced to be sincere. Her lease ended unexpectedly, and she's in a tight spot. I told her you'd probably let her use the apartment for a while. Just like that, my heart sank. I wanted to say no. I needed to. But saying no to Mom came with consequences, silent treatments, disapproving glances at family dinners, and sideways comments that made me feel like the selfish one. So I sighed and said, "She can stay, temporarily." The first should have put that word in writing. The following week, Sorrel arrived. She showed up late, as usual, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a coffee the size of a cereal bowl. Her hug was brief and hollow, the kind of hug you give when you're just checking a box. "Thanks again. Seriously," she said with a breezy smile. She brought more than a few bags. And she didn't come alone, though I didn't realize it until later. "Oh, Knox might swing by here and there," she tossed out casually as she hauled in another suitcase. "He's helping me move stuff." Knox was her boyfriend. I had met him once barely, the type of man who wore charm like cologne, strong, artificial, and overwhelming. I told her no overnight guests, no parties, no moving furniture, and to please call before making any changes. She smiled, nodded, and waved me off like I was overthinking it. A few days later, I stopped by to drop off some paperwork she needed for insurance. She hadn't been answering my texts, and I figured she was out, so I used my spare key. The moment I opened the door, something felt off. The apartment had a different scent, a mix of incense and something burnt. Music drifted from the living room, and when I rounded the corner, there he was, Knox, barefoot, shirtless, sitting on my couch like it belonged to him. "You must be Marin," he said, completely unfazed, pointing two fingers at himself like he was introducing a game show contestant. "I'm Knox. Sorrel told me you were intense." I was too stunned to speak at first. "We've kind of been staying here," he added. I left without a word. In the hallway, I called Sorrel. She answered cheerily, as if I'd caught her on a walk in the park. "Is Knox living in my apartment?" I asked. "Well, he's just crashing a few nights a week." "You said temporary, right?" "That was for you." She paused. "It's not a big deal, sis. Don't blow this up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I just hung up. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and my phone. I opened the Notes app and typed, "Funny how being nice makes people forget it's still your place." I stared at the screen, then added another line. "Tomorrow, I'll drop by again. This time, I'll knock like a stranger." I wasn't looking for a fight, but I was tired of feeling like a guest in my own life. I hadn't been back to the old apartment since the day I dropped off the insurance paperwork. Something about the silence in response to my text had gnawed at me for days, but I convinced myself it was just Sorrel being flaky again. She'd always floated through life like rules were suggestions, not standards. Still, when I parked outside that morning, muffins in hand, hope in my chest, I felt like someone visiting a place they no longer belonged. The knock on the door wasn't returned with a hello, just shuffling inside. I waited, nerves tightening with every second. Then the door cracked open, and there he was, Knox. Shirtless, casual, unbothered. The way he looked at me made my stomach turn, like I was interrupting something, not returning to something that was mine. "We changed the locks last week," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I barely processed the words. My fingers squeezed the muffin tray just a little tighter as I tried to stay composed. "This is my apartment," I said quietly, though I wasn't sure why I bothered. He just tilted his head, smiling like someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "Sure, technically, but we're living here now." We, not just Sorrel Knox too, a man I had never invited, never approved, never trusted. And now, somehow, he was talking like a co-tenant. "I wrote up some ground rules," he added, handing me a folded piece of paper, "just so we all feel safe and respected." The irony nearly knocked the wind out of me. I unfolded the paper and read, 72-hour notice for visits. No entry after 7 p.m. No discussions about bills. Emotional tone must remain calm and respectful. Emotional tone. That one nearly made me laugh out loud. The man who had locked me out of my own home now wanted to manage my emotions too. "Where's Sorrel?" I asked, trying not to sound as angry as I felt. "She's resting," he said. "Want me to pass along a message?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I turned and walked back to my car, muffins still in hand, now untouched and useless. That evening, the tray sat on my kitchen counter like a souvenir from a trip gone wrong. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down with the paper, his so-called rules, under the harsh light of the kitchen. One by one, I highlighted each point in red. Then I took a photo of it and saved it in a folder on my laptop. Legal proof. I started drafting a document, an emergency termination of the occupancy agreement. I filled it with citations, clauses, state laws, my name on the deed, their unauthorized presence, their damage. But when I reached the end, I didn't send it. Not yet. Something about it didn't feel right, not because it wasn't justified, but because they needed to understand something more than just legal language. They needed to feel what it meant to lose something they had taken for granted, not through an envelope, through consequence. The next morning, I logged into my banking portal and noticed something odd. The electric bill was nearly double, water usage too, and the Wi-Fi somehow it had been upgraded to a higher plan. I hadn't touched the account. I sent Sorrel a message. Have you noticed the utilities? They're way higher this month. 10 minutes passed. Then her reply came, "Oh yeah." Knox said the heater's been acting weird. Maybe that's it. The heater. Right. And I suppose the upgraded internet was for comfort while fixing it? A chill passed over me, not from the air, but from something deeper. A realization. This wasn't just a boundary crossed. This was a line that had been trampled. I left the house under the pretense of grabbing groceries, but found myself turning toward the old neighborhood. I didn't plan it. My hands seemed to drive themselves. When I arrived, the building was quiet. Mid-afternoon sun shone through the trees, but the blinds in my unit were drawn tight. A porch light was already on, unusual for that hour. It didn't feel like my place anymore. Still, I walked up and checked the mailbox. It was empty. I'd set up forwarding weeks ago, but some institutions still sent things to the old address out of habit. And if those envelopes didn't reach me, where were they going? That night, after putting away groceries, I couldn't shake the feeling. I logged into my bank's live chat and asked about the last 2 paper statements. Yes, the agent typed back. Both were sent to the original address. Delivered last Thursday. Delivered. But not to me. I called Sorrel. No answer. Again. Still nothing. The next day, I returned with coffee. Not as an offering, just as camouflage. When Knox opened the door, still in pajama pants and a cartoon t-shirt, I tried to smile. "Have you seen any mail for me?" I asked, voice steady. "Bank statements. They should have arrived last week." He shrugged. "We tossed some junk mail. Didn't see anything with your name." Behind him, I caught a glimpse of the dining table. Papers, envelopes, and packages were scattered across it like a yard sale. "Can I take a look myself?" He moved, blocking the doorway. "Sorrel's still asleep," he said, almost like an apology. "You get it, right?" I didn't answer, just turned and walked away. Back in my car, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly it hurt. I hadn't felt this powerless since the days after my divorce, when every signature on every page felt like a piece of myself being traded for survival. But this time, I wasn't going to cry over it. I went home, opened my laptop, and created a folder titled Violation Log, Apartment B. In it, I listed everything: unauthorized lock change, mail interference, utility manipulation, occupancy without lease. I even included Knox's printed rules, and that was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. The quiet hum of my apartment, once a comfort, now rang hollow. I sat up long past midnight, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had turned so sharply. How had my act of kindness turned into a siege? The next morning, the drizzle had returned. Portland rain, never dramatic, but always there, like a persistent reminder that some things never change. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hands still stiff from sleep, and sat at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop to pay the bills, just part of the routine. Mortgage, insurance, utilities. Except the electric bill had nearly doubled. My brow furrowed. Water usage was through the roof. The Wi-Fi? Somehow upgraded to a more expensive plan. I hadn't touched any of those accounts. My chest tightened. I texted Sorrel. "Hey, have you noticed the utilities? They're way higher this month." She replied 10 minutes later. "Oh yeah, Knox said the heater's been glitchy. Maybe that's it?" That didn't sit right. Knox didn't know how to change a light bulb, let alone diagnose a heating system. And since when did a heater cause the internet to triple in price? I stared at my phone, then closed my laptop without paying anything. Something was off. Something was being hidden. And if I'd learned anything over the years, it was this: when your gut speaks in a whisper, listen, because soon enough, it might be screaming. That afternoon, I left the house under the guise of running errands. But as I turned the corner near the grocery store, I found myself making a left instead of a right. My car seemed to drive itself toward the old apartment. I hadn't planned it. I just needed to see. The street was unusually quiet for a weekday. The blinds were drawn. The porch light was on odd for 2 in the afternoon. It looked lived in. No, it looked, claimed. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood by the mailbox embedded in the wall. I'd forwarded all my mail when I moved out, but old habits die hard. Some places' banks, credit card companies still sent paper, and if those letters ended up in the wrong hands, that night, I sat at my desk and opened a chat with my bank's customer service. "Can you tell me where my last 2 paper statements were mailed?" The response came back quickly. "Yes. Last 2 were sent to the old address. Delivered last Thursday. Delivered, but not received." I closed the laptop. The next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee, poured some into a to-go cup, and drove back to the apartment. My olive branch. I told myself it was just coffee, just a neighborly drop by. But it wasn't. It was reconnaissance. It was something far deeper than I wanted to admit. Knox answered the door, wearing the same pair of plaid pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt that had seen better days. "Morning," he muttered. I handed him the coffee. "Have you seen any mail for me?" "Bank statements, specifically." "They should have come last week." He shrugged, casual as ever. "We tossed the junk. Didn't see anything with your name on it." Behind him, the apartment looked like a college dorm after a weekend bender. Envelopes and packages were scattered across the table like confetti. "Can I just take a quick look?" I asked, already stepping forward. He blocked the doorway, his body language shifting. "I'd rather not." Sorrel's still asleep. "You get it, right?" I didn't answer. I didn't argue either. I just turned around and walked back down the stairs. My jaw clenched so tightly, I felt the pressure in my temples. I didn't even start the car right away. Just sat there, my hands on the steering wheel staring straight ahead. I had warned Sorrel months ago. Over dinner at Mom and Dad's, I'd asked her gently, politely not to mess with anything addressed to me. "It's not just junk," I told her. "It's connected to my identity, my credit, my accounts." She laughed, wine glass in hand. "Okay, boss lady. Chill." I should have known then. The red flags weren't just visible. They were waving like parade banners. Back home, I opened a folder on my desktop and labeled it Violation Log. Apartment BI began typing. Unauthorized lock change. Unauthorized occupant. Mail interference. Utility tampering. I paused, leaned back, and rubbed my temples. Then I sent another text. "Next time I visit, I'll need access to the mailbox." No response. An hour passed, then 2. Her status dot stayed green online, but she remained silent. That evening, I tried to distract myself by making dinner. A roast chicken, potatoes, something warm, something to ground me. But the meal didn't taste like comfort. It tasted like effort, like an attempt to pretend everything wasn't unraveling. Later that night, I placed a sticky note on the fridge, just 5 words, written in red ink. "When you take back what's yours, do it without shaking." Then I folded the most recent bills into a red folder, placed it beside my laptop, and sat down at my vanity. I opened a drawer, pulled out a tube of lipstick, and applied it slowly, deliberately, like armor. I looked into the mirror, not to check my reflection, but to face it. Then I whispered, "Next visit, I'm not knocking. I didn't sleep much the night before. I kept hearing creaks in the floorboards that weren't there, a hum in the walls that only existed in my mind. It was like the apartment itself was telling me it wasn't mine anymore. But I wasn't ready to give up on it. Not after all I'd survived within those 4 walls. That space had seen me rebuild from a crumbling divorce, start a new job, and learn how to breathe again. The next morning, the rain returned, light but steady, a soft percussion on my window. I wrapped myself in my old navy coat, the one with frayed pockets but still warm, and headed to the old apartment with one purpose: to retrieve a few things I hadn't had the heart to move. A photo album, a shoebox marked Venice honeymoon keepsakes. That trip had been the last good memory before everything fell apart with Mark. I didn't want the marriage back. I just wanted to hold on to the part of me that still believed in peace. When I knocked, it was Knox who answered again, always with that same expression, like he was doing me a favor by acknowledging me. "I need to grab a few of my things," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He tilted his head, feigning surprise. "Oh, yeah, about that. We got rid of some of the old junk. Thought it was just leftover crap." My heart dropped. "What do you mean got rid of?" "The blue vase? Sold it. Facebook Marketplace. $50. You're welcome." It wasn't just a vase. It had survived 3 moves, 2 apartments, and 1 broken marriage. He couldn't have known that. He didn't care. My hands clenched before I realized it. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out. Back in my car, I cranked the heat and sat, with frozen fingers wrapped around the steering wheel. That vase had made it through storms worse than him, but this cut differently. My phone rang. "Mom." I should have let it go to voicemail, but I answered, against my better judgment. "I just got off the phone with your sister," she said immediately. "She said you barged in and started yelling at Knox." "I didn't yell," I said. "And even if I had, it would have been justified. They sold something that wasn't theirs. You always hold on to things too tightly. Maybe that's why your marriage didn't last." It wasn't the first time she'd used that line. A dull knife she never sharpened because she knew even dull ones cut if you press long enough. "You're acting like a tyrant, Marin. Maybe try a little empathy for once." I didn't hang up. I didn't say goodbye. I just let the phone fall into my lap. Her voice kept rambling on, muffled by the distance between her world and mine. When I got home, I didn't journal. I didn't light a candle or turn on a show to distract myself. I opened my laptop and got to work. No emotions, no metaphors. Just clean, legal preparation. I drafted a formal eviction notice. Attached were photos of the damage, the cracked lamp base, beer stains on my rug, a screenshot of the online listing showing my vase sold. I added text messages that had gone ignored, my doubled utilities, and a picture of the house rules they taped to my own refrigerator, like I was a guest in my own life. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger, then that's exactly what they were going to get. That night, I printed the notice, slid it into a crisp envelope, and sealed it with a firm press. In block letters, I wrote, "To Sorrel and Knox, open immediately." I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt still. And after so much chaos, stillness was something. 2 days passed. No response, no apology, no confrontation. Then came the email. Subject, HOA inquiry. Urgent response requested. I read it 3 times before the words made any sense. A complaint had been filed against me. Allegations of unannounced visits, verbal intimidation, disruption of tenant peace. If verified, I could be barred from entering my own property without written permission. Knox had gone to the HOA, as if I was the threat. At work, I excused myself from a meeting and sat in my car in silence. I wasn't scared. I wasn't confused. I was livid. That night, I pulled up every profile Knox had online. I found a Reddit thread he'd posted it himself. A grainy video of me knocking on the apartment door. No sound, no context, just me, caught mid-frame, labeled as the Karen landlord from hell. The comments were vicious. "She looks like she's about to call the cops because someone breathed too loud." Classic landlord behavior. My name wasn't fully shown, but it didn't take much for someone to connect the dots. One user had already posted a link to my LinkedIn profile. I didn't cry. I didn't reply. I saved it all. Every screenshot, every comment, every frame of that video. That night, I told Dad I'd be picking up the rest of my belongings from the apartment. He didn't say much, just nodded, like maybe he finally saw what I'd been trying to protect all along. By the time I arrived at the apartment again, it felt smaller, not physically but emotionally, like a memory that finally shrank back to size once you stopped feeding it. Knox wasn't home. Sorrel was packing. She didn't say anything, just handed me an envelope that had clearly been sealed a while. Inside, a note: "You win. Enjoy your little kingdom. Maybe if you knew how to love people, you wouldn't always be so alone." It didn't hurt. Not really, because it told me everything I needed to know. She never thought this was about respect. She thought it was about winning and losing. I folded the note, slid it back in the envelope, and tucked it into my coat. I looked at her, and for the first time, I truly saw the gap between us. "You know the difference between us?" I said, not raising my voice. I had to learn how to live without applause. She didn't respond. She just sealed up another box. By sundown, they were gone. And for the first time in a long while, the apartment felt quiet, not empty, rested, like it had finally exhaled. I stood in the middle of the room, listening to the silence. No music, no laughter, no broken boundaries echoing through the walls. Just peace. I hadn't won anything, but I'd reclaimed something. And sometimes that's more important than winning. The next morning, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in months: stillness. Not silence that came with dread, or the kind that hummed with tension just beneath the surface. This stillness was clean. Light filtered in gently through the blinds. There were no texts waiting, no unread emails blinking like alarms, no arguments pending. Just the quiet hum of a place that finally belonged to me again. Later that week, I hired a professional cleaning crew. I didn't have to, but I needed it. They scrubbed the apartment from top to bottom. The scent of lemon cleaner filled the air, replacing the old cocktail of burnt toast, weed, and cheap cologne that had lingered too long. They lifted months of grime from the corners, wiped away beer rings, and erased the fingerprints that didn't belong. I kept the windows open all day, letting the cool spring breeze pass through every room like a cleansing breath. I repainted the walls, soft almond in the bedroom, clean, crisp white in the living room. I replaced the stained rug with one I chose deliberately, this time something subtle but grounding. I even swapped out the light fixtures, installed softer bulbs. It didn't just look like my space again, it felt like it. A week later, I took new photos and listed the apartment for rent. The listing was simple: clean, quiet, respectful tenants only. By the following Saturday, I met the new tenant at the door. Her name was Elise, a medical resident who had just moved to Portland for a residency at the local hospital. She couldn't have been more than a few years older than Sorrel, but her presence was entirely different. Calm, attentive. She asked good questions. Read every page of the lease carefully. No assumptions. No flippant smiles or dismissive waves. When I handed her the keys, I said, "Respect the space, and it'll take care of you." She smiled and nodded. "I've been looking for something like this for months. Thank you." I watched her walk into the apartment. No sting in my chest, just a quiet kind of pride. That night, I returned to my place, kicked off my shoes, and curled up on the couch with a glass of wine in one hand and my feet tucked beneath a quilt. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. My phone buzzed on the table. A group message. From Mom. "We know things got messy. Your dad and I hope we can sit down together soon when you're ready." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. I stared at her words for a while, wondering if they would change if I looked long enough. They didn't. Forgiveness isn't a prize I'm ready to hand out just because someone remembered my name again. And maybe, just maybe, I'm done trying to be the bigger person if it means being the one bleeding quietly. I turned the phone face down on the coffee table and let the silence settle again. 2 days later, I ran into Mrs. Varela in the elevator. She adjusted the strap on her purse and gave me a kind smile. "Quiet week," she said, voice low. "Glad to see the old noise is gone." I smiled back. "You and me both." She leaned in slightly, like she was telling me a secret. "I heard Sorrel moved back in with your parents." I nodded. I figured. "And the boy? What's his name?" "Knox? Yes, him." She pursed her lips. "Someone said he moved to LA. Apparently, that charm doesn't stretch far when the money's not someone else's." I didn't react. I wasn't interested in Knox's downfall. I wasn't even interested in Sorrel's regret. They could figure themselves out on someone else's time. What I had was enough. A key that worked, a space that breathed, a silence that finally sounded like peace. That weekend, I was scrolling online, just passing time, when I stumbled on something unexpected. A vintage seller's page. There it was, the vase, my vase, the one from Venice, the one Knox sold for $50. Now it was listed for more. Of course it was, but I didn't hesitate. I clicked buy now. When it arrived, I opened the box slowly, peeling back the layers of bubble wrap like I was unwrapping something sacred. It was the same vase. The crack near the base was still there. You wouldn't notice it unless you knew where to look. I ran my fingers along the surface, tracing the imperfections. And then I placed it carefully on the windowsill in my kitchen, where the morning sun could catch the blue curves just right. They had broken things, but I replaced them, not because they deserved a second chance, and not because I'd forgiven the damage, but because I forgave myself for believing they wouldn't break it in the first place. I stood there for a moment, letting the light pour in, and I realized something. Some scars you carry, some you frame. Not all lessons come wrapped in apologies or sealed in closure. Sometimes, the people who hurt you go on like nothing happened, and sometimes they never look back. But that's where you find your strength, not in winning the argument or proving the point. You find it in rebuilding, quietly, deliberately, for yourself. If you've ever given too much, stayed too long, or silenced your own needs just to keep the peace, then maybe this story is yours too. Maybe you've also learned that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. And choosing yourself, that doesn't make you the villain, it makes you whole. If this story spoke to something inside you, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw the line with someone you loved? Or reclaim something that was yours, your peace, your home, your voice? Let's talk in the comments. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more real, human stories just like this one. Until next time.